a motion to move the agenda around a bit so we can address the aquaculture issues, because those are the biggest issues and why we have quite so many people in attendance. I would like to know if the Bowens are online. Have you seen them at all?
I haven't yet.
Okay, Dave Butel, do you know if the Bowens are intending to attend? I thought they were.
I thought they were too.
Okay, do you have a phone number you want to call them at and see if they're going to join us? And then we'll go to the call-in applications.
I don't have that capability from home.
Okay. Well, we'll just have to wait and see. Perhaps, do we have the people, Keith Cullen, Aquacultural Test Sites online?
Cullen. Keith Cullen's on, yes.
Okay, why don't we bring him up? Keith? He's
Hey, can you
muted.
guys hear me?
Yeah, now we have you. You're now active.
Sorry, guys. Sorry,
Okay.
I had a hard time connecting here.
Understood. So first, just for housekeeping purposes, I'd like a motion from the board, and it has to be roll call votes, guys, no matter what we're doing, to change the agenda around and go to item G1, the Keith Cullen Aquacultural Test Sites. Can I have a motion, please?
This is Greg. I'll move it.
Greg moves and Dave Stewart seconds.
Yep.
All those in favor, Dave Stewart,
Aye.
Greg Banner,
Aye.
Andy Sundberg,
Aye.
Jason Clement,
Aye.
Chip Lawrence,
Aye.
and I'll say aye. So we're now on, we've jumped to Keith Cullen's for the presentation on your proposal, Keith.
Excellent. Thanks so much for your time. I'm sorry, Seth Garfield, who is our consultant and our oyster expert, is having a hard time joining into this program. But we've been looking at a couple sites regarding possible 2 locations in Tiverton. I do own a building in Tiverton, 1780 Main Road, for the last 12 years or so. And we've been actively, we own a restaurant in Newport. We've been actively looking for a couple locations to start an oyster process. We've hired a consultant, Seth, who has been in the oyster business for over 30 years. And he has been helping us with finding a location along with Dave. And they have cited these 2 locations as very, very optimal locations. We are looking for an opportunity to do a couple test batches in these locations to make sure that the 2 locations are operable and efficient to grow.
You want to tell us where the locations are and why they're favorable at this point?
Well, that's really come out of the descriptions from our two main consultants and Dave from Coastal Resources. So one is in Nequonset Pond and one is in the river right on the other side. One is on the very north side of the pond. These would be small test sites, and then hopefully having that opportunity to make sure that they are viable.
Keith, if I may correct you, your application in the pond is at the south end. The very
South end.
South end, right.
South
Okay.
end.
Yeah, I remember seeing that.
That's a big difference.
It is.
Would you describe what you're proposing and what you'd be putting in there, what it would look like from the surface, at the surface level, what limitations would be required of people that would otherwise want to use the area?
Right. So I think that is something that we were hoping our consultant would be involved in. I mean, he was looking to do small. They would be in the and the pond itself would be small submersible cages. It is very shallow there. And he has been out to the site several times. I am here to sort of help facilitate the operation, more so looking for the guidance of skilled operators to make sure that environmentally and from a neighborhood type of operation that they are handled properly.
Do you know what the intended management of the site would be, how it would be conducted in terms of cleaning the cages and that sort of thing?
I do not. I mean, really, I'm sorry that, Seth Garfield, I'm not sure if you're familiar with his operation. He was managing the whole physical operation of both sites just to make sure that they were viable, and then coming up with and implementing the structure that he had already put forth in the documentation. I'll be frank, I'm not an oyster farmer by trade. We are looking to work with a skilled operator that's been in the field for 30 plus years, and have somebody else operate.
Does he have, are you having difficulty reaching him now, or?
Yeah, I was just trying to text him. I'm sorry. He just texted me saying he was having a hard time logging in.
What's his
Yeah,
name?
No,
Seth Garfield is listed under the participants right now, so maybe he made it in.
he might be having hard. Maybe I see one that's muted. Oh, there he is.
Excellent.
There. Hey, Seth.
Good evening. Sorry about that. I've logged on twice.
You're on now. Good. So you'll know at the top queue here, I'm Bruce Cox in the chair. To my right is Dave Stewart. Then we have Greg Banner, Andy Schumberg, Jason Clement, and Charles Lawrence. They are all board members. We also have on as a phone member, Paul Duarte. He's over at the extreme right of your
Froze
screen.
up there.
Right. And then the harbor master, Tyler Loomis, is also there on the screen. We may or may not get another gentleman, Peter Core, on deck. But anyways, we were just in a preliminary discussion of what's being proposed. It's a very good thing you're here, because Keith is trusting you, and we were asking, what is the proposed site going to look like from the shore, and what would you anticipate if this turns out to be a viable site in the way of cages, and how you're going to grow these oysters in the site? We're dealing with an Anaquaca Pond site at this point.
Yeah, so I logged on in the beginning and I've heard all of that. So thank you for having us here tonight. As you know, we're applying for the two sites, one in Anaquaca Pond on the south end and one on the river, pretty much opposite that area. Both of these sites have been suggested, as you know, by the Coastal Resource Management Council as possible good sites to grow oysters. So my name is Seth Garfield. I've been running an oyster farm on Cuttyhunk Island for 39 years. And we've been using Japanese lantern nets as a method. And we live in a very small town. On a good night, there might be 5 or 10 people here in the winter, and there might be 500 people in the summer. So Mr. Cullen has hired me to fill out the applications, which all of you have in front of you, clearly showing the 2 locations and also some possible equipment that is going to be tested there. As you know, we're applying for a commercial viability aquaculture permit, which gives us approximately 1,000 square foot area to figure out if those 2 sites are going to be suitable. I know there was just recently a question on what type of equipment. As you know, in the Anaquaca Pond, it's quite shallow. So we would be looking towards some type of floating gear or the possibility of some on-bottom cages with legs on them, depending on the sedimentation down there. On the river site, if you see on the application, we would be trying 2 or 3 different types of equipment. both on bottom cages, the possibility of a Grow Pro, which are kind of these new floats that have oysters suspended underneath them. And then also the traditional Japanese lantern nets. And if you see that in your application, there's some pictures of those three particular gear. All of the plan for the summer is to get 2 or 3 or 4 of these systems in each site. We would be monitoring water quality, including temperature, dissolved oxygen, turbidity, growth of, sea creatures, all of the biofouling that goes there. And trying to get the oysters just to get a growth rate over time between whenever we got them there. And pretty much in and around New England, oysters stop growing about the 3rd week of November. I believe one of the committee members had a question about the possibility of drying gear, et cetera. With the small systems that we're placing in each of those areas, there really wouldn't be any of that. If anything, we would be switching out gear and keeping it on the small skiff and moving it to wherever we haul out and take it with us, since this is a test site. I feel that overall, this is a great opportunity to investigate these 2 sites, because obviously Tiverton and many towns in Rhode Island and Narragansett Bay have a rich history of fishing, especially sustainable fisheries. And the opportunity, the fact that Keith Cullen is a property owner on the pond, he's a member of the community there, and it seems like a good opportunity to try and grow at those 2 particular sites. And clearly in the regulations and the applications that we filled out, either of those sites may not be suitable between either temperature or too much biofouling or other issues that are there. It might be depth. But those 2 sites that we have looked at have been basically pre-approved in the sense of the locations as those areas. So I'd be happy to answer any further questions at this time. Thank you for your time.
If I may lead off here, I'm looking at the Grow Pro bottom or floating surface type cages, and I'm looking at the floating bags. Do they, as the name implies, float with their pontoons on the surface, and the bags or the cages suspended underneath them? That's
correct. And one of the advantages to this particular system is it's using the warmest water on the surface. So, and the phytoplankton because of the light factor, but also if the cage does become fouled, which it obviously will, you flip it over for 24 hours and any of the biofouling that's on the cage and the netting is exposed to the air for 24 hours, and then you flip it back. So there would be cages and floats on the surface, at least in the test area. And would they be using the same systems in a larger scale if the tests prove fruitful? That we would be doing a cost-benefit analysis with the 2 or 3 different systems at each site. So there could be the opportunity for floating cages if it was deemed that was the most efficient way to do that. And how large would a commercially viable system have to be? In the square footage of the application, I think it's 1.9 acres. You would have them in rows. I'm talking about the river site. We would have them in rows going with the current, obviously. And, that could end up being whatever the dimensions are, 300 by 300 feet in that particular area. So into total number of cages, you might be talking several hundred to grow out the oysters, the number of oysters that would be there. I'm assuming the first year and everything was approved, that we would be looking to put, let's just take the river site for an example, 100,000 oysters. So you would be looking at about, there's 6 in each one. You'd be looking at least 60 or 70 of those Grow Pro cages in that system for the first year as it starts to build into a commercial venture, assuming the first year was successful in determining that. Just an interesting note, Bruce. And there's pictures of the Japanese lantern nets.
Mhm.
Those would be suspended by a single, I think they're called 11 by 14 inch high density poly foam buoy. So those buoys would also be visible from the surface, but have a significantly less visual impact versus a floating cage.
Okay, because you realize where you're proposing to put these are in fact on waterfront acreage of residential use.
Yes, I did a couple of, well, before COVID, I did drive down in the neighborhood and scoped out the homes that were there, both in the pond as well as on the west side of the little neck there.
Mhm.
So when you drove down, you saw that you went across an inlet from a smaller pond that comes out of Siniflish Brook? Yes?
Yes, yep.
Right. You know that that's loaded with ducks and geese. And so there's very high bacterial content in that pond, which makes its way partway out of there before it gets diluted.
Yes, I did. I looked at the overlay maps from the state but also indicated that Nanaquacket Pond was not seasonally closed for shellfishing.
Yes, but I don't know where you want in the river. The one is outside of the pond that's in the river? Is that correct?
I don't have, I mean,
I'm
do
afraid-
you have the map in front of you
I don't
of our
have anything.
proposed site?
Would you share your screen? That would help. I saw the one in the pond in the south end, but I didn't see the other one.
The one, Chip, the one in the river is basically directly in front of the Winnissimmet neighborhood.
Oh, okay, fine. Yep, you're safely away from it.
Okay.
In terms of if at both these sites, if you're using the Japanese lantern format, people will be able to kayak and do, small surface vessels through the area. Am I correct?
Yes, I happen to have Japanese lantern nets for my system. We have 1,200 nets in the pond. We have approximately a 30-acre pond that we only use about 40% of. And there are plenty of recreational skiffs that come out, the stand-up paddle boards, kayaks, and that would work in the river. But by looking at the nautical charts for the Nanaquacket Pond, especially on an especially low tide, moon tide type of a thing, it looks like there may only be 1 or 2 feet of water in that particular area. So most likely, Japanese lantern nets would not necessarily be suitable there. So if you're concerned with the size of the equipment, the GoPros, if they're lined up correctly, I know there's a gentleman in Block Island that uses those, and it ends up being kind of a tourist destination. People want to go paddle over and see what the place looks like. And then the other fun thing, and I've done some analysis, I look at all of the bait fish and the habitat that my Japanese lantern nets create, and it ends up being kind of a natural reef for all kinds of critters, sticklebacks, mummy chogs, all kinds of critters. So there's some, in unintended benefits for these systems.
So on the Nanaquacket Pond site, if you went into production, you would have to then come into the pond with what type of equipment and how frequently?
Andy, assuming that whether it was cages on or off bottom, let's talk about 200 cages, just for the sake of doing a number. Those cages would be, the first year growing would basically be maintained with a small skiff, most likely a Carolina skiff, something to the tune of, those 16 to 18 footers. They're nice and wide. Gear goes on it. It probably has a 20 to 30 horsepower engine, and folks will be going out there maybe once or twice a week to make sure the biofouling isn't getting ahead of itself, possibly thinning out the oysters every 3 to 5 weeks, depending on the growth rate that's there. And then let's just fast forward to 2 years ahead. The part part of that whole process then would include the actual production harvest of the oysters. And depending on, there's two ways to do it. One is you actually have a machine on your boat and you process the oysters right there. And then you put the small ones back and you take the big ones in. Other larger production folks, they just bring all their cages in on the boat. They haul their boat, they take it to their processing facility. And then the next day they bring the small oysters back and do it all over again, depending on the time of year. Some of the oyster farms are year round, which are the much larger ones, and some are more seasonal. They might just decide they're going to sell their oysters from, January through June, plant another crop. And just quickly for the board, and I know some of you know about aquaculture, but as an example, in my system, I have 400,000 oysters in the system. 200,000 are left over from last year, which I'll grow or sell this year. But I planted another 200,000, and only 20% of those will be ready this year. The next will be for the next year, and then eventually the slow growers will be used in the third year. So there's kind of a rhythm that you have to get into, and it almost takes 3+ years to get into any substantial rhythm and processing of an oyster farm. Just because in the oyster seed that you get, you have fast growers and slow growers. Hopefully that answered your question, Andy.
Hey, Seth, the application mentions monitoring of dissolved oxygen, temperature, water clarity. Is that going to be done by sensors that are deployed actually at the site, or will that be sort of like point source when somebody goes out there with a YSI or similar?
Hopefully, Jason, really good question. That would just be done with the hatch kits and just the good old hydrometers, Secchi discs, all of that stuff, which is pretty common. I happen to be on the board at the Buzzards Bay Coalition, and we've been doing water sampling for 20 years plus. And it's very easy to do. It takes about 20 minutes, but it gives you some good water quality data there that helps support whether there are too many tunicates and all of the biofouling that goes there, or it could be a reason that the oysters are not growing. I would imagine in that neck of the woods in the middle of August on a 5-day Bermuda high in the shallow water that the water temperature gets pretty warm. And as you know, warm water holds no oxygen, and it could end up being a limiting factor there. But it would be probably once a week and done by myself for at least the first year.
Great, thank you. Would, if this does move forward, is that data something you would consider sharing with the commission or the town of Tiverton?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yep.
Any other board members have questions?
I got one. Seth, are you familiar with the mooring fields on the Sakonnet side? Have you taken a look at those?
When I was there in March, I did not see any, only because I assumed the winter sticks were there. So I am not, I'm aware of the boat yards that are up there above the bridge there. But not on that side.
Yeah, there are two very active mooring fields there, one north and one south of the proposed site. There must be 50+ moorings in those two fields. There are at least 14 of them are within 500 feet of that site, and there's a lot of recreational activity that goes on there through the summer. A lot of boats come in. The access to the cove there is from the north because it's shallow, directly on the sort of west side. So there's a lot of boat traffic that will come in on that side. And I don't know whether that's good or bad for the oysters, but I'm guessing it's not that good for the recreational boaters.
I'm just looking at my map that, so I think just quickly, Andy, water quality point of view, I'm assuming that all those, you're not concerned with any boat pump out or any waste from those boats, if those are actually cruising boats versus day sailors. And I'm assuming with the proper markings from the commission that other farms have had issues like that around the bay. And hopefully we would also be doing public education if that site was approved, to make sure that the folks to the north and south of those mooring fields would know about it, and we could just educate them about it. And just quickly, Andy, the little reference, so folks go into that place that you had mentioned where the ducks were?
I don't know if it's the place, I'm not sure if it's the place where the ducks are that they're talking about.
Okay.
No,
But
that was where the ducks are on the Nanaquacket Pond side,
Yeah.
and the Cinder Flesh Brook that feeds into Nanaquacket Pond up at the northern half of it, as opposed to the southern end.
Ac-
All right. Yep.
There's not
Actually-
there's not a large tidal flush. Well, there's
Actually,
been
Bruce, if
current-
I can share my screen, I can actually show the mooring field, if that's okay.
Yeah, good plan.
Yep. Thank you.
Host disabled attendees sharing screen. Okay, somebody has to give it to me.
Who's the host?
Chris, could you please allow Andy Schoenberg to share his screen, please?
Let me know when you can see it or if I get a message.
No, not yet.
Okay.
He's working on it.
Looks like Andy's working, Chris is working on it.
While he's working on that, Seth, the Winnisimmet site, that would be the Sakonnet side, gets a fair fetch of wave action and a good blow. Is that going to bother your cages? I mean, when I say a fair fetch, I live on the Sakonnet side, and during some of the large blows we've had where we had 30 and 40 knots of air, I've had 3 and 4 foot wave action out in front of my dock and house.
No, that's a good question. I happened to go purposely on a really, I think it was blowing 30 the day, and I believe it was pretty much from the west to notice, and I took pictures of that. And that would be in consideration of especially the mooring types that went there, as well as the equipment, such as in the depth that appears to be there. It looks like it's 6 to 8 feet deep. The lantern nets would be much more suitable there because they're below, especially the top 1 or 2 feet of any type of surf action. And that would be better. Clearly, if you had GoPros there on those right days, the oysters that would be in there would be washed back and forth on each other. And they actually kind of take on a different size and shape if it's, for a long duration. But that would definitely be part of the decision-making process with the data that we would collect over the course of the summer. I do see the picture of the mooring field.
Yeah, so this is the red area is the 2-acre site that you've proposed.
Yep.
And so, like I said, there are 2 large mooring fields, one directly north, one directly south. This area here, I don't know if you can see my cursor,
Yes.
but this area here is shallow. So that basically when boats come into this area, they do come in from the north.
Okay.
So you're pretty much in the middle of a lot of it. And I don't know about, I mean, I know when I sail, so it's not like sometimes the wind is, dictates a lot of the choices I have to make when I'm moving around. And I would consider that to be an inconvenience. You're close to an awful lot of traffic. If you look on the Nanaquacket side, the mooring situation in Nanaquacket's a little bit different, where there's only, I think, 1 mooring within 500 feet of your proposed site. And so in terms of being in the middle of a mooring field, the Nanaquacket is very, very different. But on the, on the riverside, that's a pretty congested area. Clearly not all those moorings have boats on them all summer long, but there are a lot of them.
Yep. No, it's very clear with that map.
And that's all I wanted to share.
Oh, I appreciate that. That's good information, which I did not have before.
would that change your attitude towards any of this?
Good question.
A good question. It also would go back to the possibility of, I guess, your commission to say, why don't we move that 500 feet to the west, or, you know, in the same location, but a little bit more user-friendly to folks.
You know, that's an interesting question because clearly moving it to the west gets it out of the mooring field. But once again, the access in here is from the north. So if you move it too far from the west, then you're going to be telling boats coming into this area to have to move around you yet even more. So it's a tough call.
How about moving it south down here? It's shallow water, but
You mean over around here?
Jack's Island.
down by Jack's Island, yeah.
It's much shallower there, and that would be an interesting question. The only people that tend to go close to the land there are kayakers and people with little day sailors.
There is already a aquacultural site there in that general area. I don't have the coordinates for it. I can
Yeah.
see it. I've gone to it. I can see it from my house. The some orange balls. Dave Butel might be able to enlighten us on that point.
Good point. I think it's right around here, but I don't know for sure.
And I think it's more, a little bit further north of that.
You do? Okay.
Right. All right.
But, you know, getting back to the mooring field, and that's a good point. And I know, I think, Bruce, you had mentioned there's several letters that have to be read in. And I think I saw one from one person who was concerned about the Nanaquacket Pond site. But as I said, I've been doing this for 39 years, and there's lots of benefits. It's I guess it's the whole not in my backyard, or, you know, I got to look at it. It's always, this is just a personal note, at least in Massachusetts, if I'm a lobsterman, I can go put 500 lobster traps in front of your house and you can't say no. But if I want to put 100 buoys for oysters in front of your house, you know, you can complain about it. So it, you know, in Massachusetts, it's a local versus the state thing, where here, you know, the state's involved, obviously in the bigger level, but, you know, here we are having a public hearing on this. And there's lots of considerations that have to go into this. But the other thing, this is a side note, but I employ 20 kids in my farm, and I've been doing it for generations, to the point where I now hire their kids, and they are very pleased because it is a sustainable business and it kind of adds life to the community. So, you know, I know that you're going to read those letters, and I think that there's going to be a common theme there, but there's also a lot of good that can come out of all of this. Instead of overfishing our natural fisheries. So.
Understood. And so you know where the position is, and anyone else listening is, the commission is an advisory committee to the town council. We do speak for the town from time to time in sense of communications. And if we request that this get fully reviewed by the CRMC panel, ultimately it is CRMC that makes the call. We do not control it. What the town controls, though, is the zoning use of the land where they may land their vessels and that sort of thing. So they'll have to use a commercial site for that. They can't use a residential landfall. But the ultimate arbiter of what can and cannot go on at this site, or any sites in Rhode Island, is the Coastal Resource Management Council. And the towns can have influence, but not the absolute decision making. Just to be fair to you, and so everyone else listening in knows what the program is here. Do we have any more questions?
Hey, this is Greg. Just in general, do you have information, or maybe from Mr. Butel from CRMC, is there something available that highlights the areas that are maybe already approved or already known by CRMC that would be appropriate for this kind of work? I mean, did you, Mr. Garfield, did you start with something that CRMC had that showed 20 possible locations, and out of those you came up with these two, or how does that interaction work?
These two sites have been looked at, I think, over the last, from what I gather, 3 or 4 or 5 years. And the fact that Mr. Cullen is a property owner along the pond, he was, trying to, have something in kind of his backyard. And the fact that there's potentially two very diverse, different sites. One of the sites may be the only one that works, just from, the number of things that we've covered here today. But I have seen the map from of all of the sites in Rhode Island, and there's little kind of 2-acre spots all over the place. And just from a history point of view, I think probably aquaculture really started down in the salt ponds on the south side, or the south shore, with down in I think it was Watch Hill, and the Moonstone oysters was kind of the big one that Bob Rial started. So it's slowly coming along, and there's some sites that probably have gone through similar conversations that have been approved. There've been some sites that are obviously been torpedoed for obvious reason, or more than obvious reasons. But the biggest thing for oyster farms is water quality and the growth rate, because there's some areas that it's either too salty, too fresh, and it may not be good, but you've got to do a test in it. And that's why the whole purpose of applying for this 3-year temporary small scale permit. I hope that answered your question, Greg.
Yeah, partially. I think I was looking for if there was a bigger process to include questions like the boating traffic that Andy Sumberg just raised and things like that. If there was an overall process that CRMC used that kind of, looked at all those and then eliminated a bunch of places for one reason or another, and then you were left with places that, were fully acceptable based on whatever 7 criteria or whatever it would end up being. Just curious if that's the process that happens, or how it happens to come up with the individual sites, really.
I don't know that, and maybe Bruce, you would, if Dave's on the line, he could answer that specific question.
I'm trying to get Dave Butel brought in as a panelist.
Speaking on my phone,
He's in.
Okay, see you, Dave.
so could we unmute my phone?
We can hear you.
You're unmuted, Dave.
We can hear you, David.
Oh, okay. First off, these two applications are only commercial viability applications. So they are only for 1,000 square feet each. The larger area that's before you for both of them is speculation as to what they might take or apply for once the commercial viability was successful.
Okay, so what we'd see immediately is a small scale, but the larger scale is the dimensions shown on the plans, correct?
Correct.
Right. And I presume I was accurate in my statement earlier. I presume you're able to hear regarding the roles of the community and CRMC and who has authority and such.
I've heard the whole meeting.
Good. And there was one question that was being asked, I think, by Greg, relative to general is there an encompassing map of the aquaculture sites that are currently approved, whether or not they're in use in the Secundit River area?
The only aquaculture map that we have is for all of the areas that are used currently.
And Secundit River would be included in that map?
Yes.
And there was discussion about a aquaculture site that's south of the proposed, I'll call it the Secundit River site. It's off of Winnissimitt, the Winnissimitt neighborhood, down towards Jack's Island. Do you have an understanding where that is?
Yeah, it's fairly close to shore. It's about 4 acres, and it's actively used with bottom cages.
And that's down by, right almost directly across from Jack's Island, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, it is.
Okay, it's not south of Jack's Island, it's at Jack's Island, basically.
Correct.
Okay. Is there area down in that vicinity that would work better for the Secundit project versus right in front of the Winnesiment neighborhood where all the boats are moored?
It's hard to say.
Mhm. All right. Do you try to keep a distance between the various farms?
It really depends on the location.
Mhm.
It's not a requirement.
Okay.
Seems like there's a lot of boat traffic. I've been there in the summer going in and out of a boat. Seen that, yeah, boats pretty rarely go into both of those fields.
No, they go routinely. You have a great deal of center console activity, a number of sailboats going through there and such. Sailboats are generally just traversing to go out to the deeper water, but the center console activity is quite active. But I look out at it.
Oh, that's where that site is. Yeah.
That's you're looking there at the Winnesiment neighborhood and such, right?
This is Jack's Island, right?
That's a little, Jack's Island is a little bit further south, but you're right, correct.
So Jack's Island is here.
Right,
And so this is just, there's a breakwater. This is north of that. And there's
right.
an inlet in there. Let me bring up the Google Earth again and see. Can you see the Google Earth, or do I need to turn that on again?
You have to turn that on again.
Okay. You are sharing. Okay, what do I share?
At the top, if I remember right, you'll get share.
Okay.
So while he's doing that, I'll ask Mr. Butel, I guess, the question about, so as I understand the process up until now, these two sites that we're looking at were already sent and approved by CRMC for this testing process right now. Is that correct?
That is incorrect.
Okay.
Nothing has been approved by CRMC. We have only accepted the applications.
Okay. Okay, so how about when it does get to you in terms of evaluation, can you describe somewhat the criteria that CRMC uses? Like, is there a checklist with, again, 6, 7 different aspects that would include the navigation aspect, boating, stuff like that? Is that how your process works, or can you describe it a little bit?
That's correct. There are 13 different criteria that we look at as part of our Category B requirements for any application.
Andy, I presume that's you drawing on the screen there.
Yeah, that's my best guess as to where that is taken from.
I think it's a fair amount north of that location, more directly west of Jack's Island. Dave, can you see the screen, and do you have an opinion on that?
Well,
I actually think it's pretty close.
Okay.
Yeah, because this is the coastal resource management map. This is their map.
Mhm.
So their spot is north of the breakwater, south of this inlet, maybe facing a little bit more north than I made mine. So I drew what I tried to replicate that pretty much. So it's north of the breakwater, south of that inlet. Maybe theirs was a little more oriented, more like that, but my guess is it's pretty close. I could, with offline, I could probably get it very precise.
Yeah, Bruce, that's actually pretty close to where it is. It's a little closer, a little more south to that breakwater. I was there yesterday, actually.
So you think it's a little further south towards the breakwater?
Not the big breakwater. There's a small one that comes out there right there. Yep, it's a little closer to that, and that's exactly where it is.
Okay. So to that end, you could argue that there was room for something here. I don't know how close these things can get, which would get you out of the mooring field. And I can guarantee you that boats coming into this mooring field do not come close to Jake's Island because it is shallow there.
They only do it once.
Yeah, exactly right.
Quickly learn.
Okay.
So Seth, what's your take about that suggestion?
I think that suggestion, or just, I should have brought it up, just below mooring 39, W39. So between the south end of that mooring field and the shore, just looking at the map that I have, it potentially would be fine there. So just, so I don't know this, that yeah, right in that area. The yellow polygon that you just put there, is that a currently active commercial operation?
Yes, I believe that is. Right, Dave? Dave Butel?
Yes, it is.
Okay. All right. I have a lot of comments from over in the Nanaquacket Pond site. If we could go over there, Andy, you have a heavy residential impact in here. You don't have many moorings, and the water is relatively shallow here. Would you ever envision yourself expanding that northward into the pond? Seth?
So that particular site, I did read a couple of comments there as well. I'm assuming that at low tide, there's not a lot of activity for any boats scooting around if it's only a foot or 2 feet deep. And obviously at high tide with the 3.5 rise, that it would be more active for recreational boating, obviously off of that collection of houses and stuff by P35 to P21. And actually deeper water would be better. There's better flushing more in the middle of the pond. I'm to a certain extent assuming if there's issues on the south end of the pond that there would be as many issues or concerns in the middle of the pond, but
No, yeah, that my question was oriented more towards if you moved north, it'd be even more where people are going to be complaining about interfering with the recreational use of the waters.
yeah.
The south end there, it does get shallow at low tide, obviously. And I don't know what degree of jet skiing and such goes on in there. I would be concerned about that, obviously, as would the owners of the hardware.
Yeah, and that, again, that's an educational thing, working with the harbor master and educating people there. I know that southern parcel of land there, which is open space. I don't know the name of it, but I believe that's the land that Keith, jump in here. That's what you guys have part of?
Oh, that's what we're speaking with the current owner, yes.
Yeah.
Would that be for residential or commercial?
For that piece of land, that would be more environmental and donated for the most part, except at the intersection of Main Road. So that would be, most of that's wetland, and we're speaking with the land trust to possibly donate a portion of that property.
Through the Open Space Commission.
That's correct.
Mm-hmm.
And if I'm not mistaken, that the cages there would probably be floating cages because of the lack of depth. Am I correct?
That would be logical. The other thing that would be interesting, getting back to the water quality is, and I don't know, maybe the state does this, but the nitrogen loading that comes off of all of the land there and the less circulation there is that could have a potential nitrogen loading issue where the oyster farm would actually help solve that.
That's a big problem there, isn't it?
There is a fair amount of fresh water that comes in down here. There from this pond
Yep.
and just basically water draining in from storms. So there's a lot of fresh water comes in at the southern end. I don't know what that does to your oysters.
It makes them less briny. Gives them their signature taste.
Okay, from a perspective of proximity to the devices, to your farm, how close can boaters come?
And at least on my farm, everybody paddles around it and they look what we're doing. And they, you know, if we're out there working, they come up and they chat with us to see what's going on. You know, for kayakers, you should be able to kayak down the rows, assuming it's, you know, commercial. The small little setup that we would do this year would be probably 4 or 5 buoys that might be, you know, within the 1,000 square foot, you know, requirement of that space. And, you know, obviously jet skis and stuff like that are, you know, you're not going to want to hit them or any other boats. But I'm unaware of any legal document that says they have to stay 50 feet or 100 feet away. That would be a Dave question or a town shellfish board.
I'm being asked by somebody, by Chris Madovic, if the triangles, the parallelograms shown are the commercially viable sites or they're the test sites. I think those are the proposed, would be the commercial site, right?
Yes, that's the dimensions for the 1.9 acre. And obviously the other 1,000 square foot would be, you know, you do the math, that's 20 feet by 50 feet or whatever. So it would just be in one of the corner markers as the test site.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. Any more questions, gentlemen?
No.
Chris, from a perspective of housekeeping, do you see Peter Corr online at all? C-O-R-R?
I hadn't, but I need to get to I gotta get out of this shared screen.
Yeah. Oh, there you go. A list of everybody. So we're going to do a roll call vote. We need to have comments and whatnot. Does anyone want to start? Let's do them separate. There are 2 applications. There's Nanaquacket and then there's the Secaunet. So we'll start with the Nanaquacket site. But before we do that, we have to allow people to put their hands up and make their comments, and then I have to read the comments into the record, which is going to take a period of time. I will read as quickly as I can and as articulately as I can, but it still has to be done. So, Chris, can you see if there's anyone that's want to to raise their hand so they can?
I don't see Peter Corr. That's the first thing I was trying to get rid of.
Understood.
So we have a number of people with hands up. Paul Paul Duart, who's on the phone, right? You're actually in the meeting, right?
He's actually on the commission.
So, did I mute you? Okay, he's unmuted. He can speak.
Yes, he should have been active all the time.
Paul?
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Sorry.
I've been raising my hand. Well,
Oh, they
5 or
had
6.
that shared screen thing and I couldn't see the attendees list.
Oh, okay. Oh well. Anyways, before we move on to the vote, can I make a couple of questions? In the wintertime, in the Nanaquacket Pond, is some substantial freezing. Would that affect that whole farm area, or if it were to be approved for growing, and what would happen if there was a deep freeze in there? Some winters, that shallow end that always freezes first, anyways, and it may freeze right to the bottom for all I know. I don't know.
Jeff, if you could answer that?
Yep. Oh, definitely. A very great question. And another thing to consider, just a quick sidestep. If you're an oyster farmer in Cape Cod Bay, you actually have to take all of your gear and all of your oysters out basically by December 20th for fear of icing, windstorms or anything like that. In that particular site, and what they do is they take the oysters out and literally put them in a refrigerator for the winter. It's kind of like a root cellar, that concept. And that would be an added level of, labor, et cetera, to do that instead of rolling the dice and potentially having the oysters freeze, because they can survive, but they don't do well.
One of the other questions I had was the type of oyster seed that you would be using. I know I've heard from previous talks about this oyster farming, that there's some seed that is an invasive type of seed. It's like an invasive species type. So what type of seed would you be using in both?
Another good question. I believe the state, and Dave would correct me, but it has to be certified disease-free from a certified hatchery. So the seed has to go out to a state pathologist or an accepted pathologist to make sure that there's no disease that is transported across state line. And then the species would be the Crassostrea virginicus, which is the American cupped oyster, which is the same oyster that goes from Newfoundland all the way down to Texas. But no, you would not want to bring in any type of an invasive species. And the only one I can think of would have been the Chinese oyster, which was discussed 20 years ago for the Chesapeake Bay, or the European flat oyster, the Austria edulis, which that would need a special permit in the state if I'm correct, Dave.
Okay, well that gives you a good feeling about what's going on in that respect, that you know what you're doing, because I certainly don't. I'm just asking the question.
Oh no, it's very well regulated, and it's worked to stop this. The main disease is called MSX, and it really is. The states are doing a good job by making sure that they're certified.
Going back to when the discussion was at possibly taking the site in the Sakonnet River and moving it towards Jack's Island, is any consideration, because we've had some people want to put in, I'm sorry, in a public fishing area, the public fishing areas. So I don't know if DEM is here, or last time we had DEM bring to light that they were going to put a farm in the public fishing area, regardless of whether there's quahogs or clams or whatnot there. Nonetheless, it's a public fishing area. So I think that one that is existing in Sepauwett is just outside the public fishing area. So I just wanted to keep in mind that I would like DEM to weigh in on any location and change, because the fact that this thing is in a mooring field, this one in the Secundit River, other than that, it looks great, but it's really depends on the weather, is the way the boat's going to come to his mooring, and if he can't get to his mooring, excuse me again, because there's a field there, that's going to be very, it puts the boater at risk, and him crashing into your field. I don't know what's going on. I'm down in the basement trying to stay out of everybody's way, and I've just come down with a coughing fit. It's not COVID though. So
Hopefully.
I hope not. Anyways, and the other thing too, I would be concerned with is the abutters to that site, the field in the Secundit River. Would that take their water access away? That they have rights to the water there, so I would be concerned with that. Those are all my questions in a nutshell.
Okay, so we have Seth Hagen. Go on, speak.
I was going to let Seth Garfield answer those questions.
Okay, all right.
There's obviously some concern here with the mooring field issue. Another thing that would be investigated during the course of the summer permit that we're getting basically is to actually look at on-bottom equipment that might only stick 1 or 2 feet off of the bottom, and then boats could go over it. Again, I don't know the size of the boats that are in that mooring field, or if they're keel boats, or if they're, small, just day sailors. But that's something that could clearly be addressed, Paul, in your comments just there, and a couple of people in the chat room. That could be an on-bottom site. Everything would be below, except marked by the appropriate corner markers from the state requirements.
Yeah, I don't think that would be a problem, but you said you only have 6 feet of depth there, so again, is 6 feet at low tide, or is that 6 feet at high tide?
That's mean low water on the nautical charts.
Okay.
There are some big boats deep, right, that are in this office, Winnisibby.
There are several sailboats that are deep draft boats.
Yep.
I have 2 questions from the people at large. One of them from Chris Medovic to all. How does the area affect riparian rights for people wanting to drop moorings in the future? I would imagine once a field is granted by CRMC, that is limited to that farmer. Am I correct, Dave? Dave, you got to unmute yourself.
Yes, that would be correct.
Okay. And then the other question was for Seth Garfield. He's left for a moment. So we'll come back to it. Okay, Seth is back. Gentleman asking, W. Carts asking, I've snorkeled for little necks in the area in front of the Winnisibby farm for the last 30 years. Will I be able to swim between the rows of pots to continue? A snorkel diver for little neck.
He can take all the cohogs he wants, and basically that would be a relationship that he would develop with the farm, and hopefully something like that. You're not, at least in Massachusetts, the law says you can't take the oysters, but if you would allow recreational fishing in and around, and then there's also liability issues, so it really depends on how technical you want to get.
And Dave Butel, you raised your hand. Did you want to respond to that?
The law in Rhode Island is that from an aquaculture site, no one can take the indigenous shellfish.
Oh, okay. So the answer to Mr. Katz is no. The Carts. All right. We have 4 participants' hands raised. Shall we start talking to some of them, Chris Cotta?
So Seth Hagan, are you allowed to speak?
Yes, where is Seth Hagan?
He's coming. Seth?
Yes. Hi, Chris. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello. Thanks to the committee. Appreciate all your insightful questions. I have several questions. The first one is for Dave Butel, please. Has CRMC ever granted permission for a test site and then declined a commercial site application that was followed on in that same area?
CRMC has not had that experience. Typically, people either apply for a site and they get a site that might be what they applied for, or it could be a little smaller. There are also many people that get a test site and do not apply for a full aquaculture site.
Thanks for that. So one of the, I'm sorry, I forgot to mention, I'm a resident of Tiverton, 540 Nanaquacket Road. One of the points that's been brought up repeatedly is the fact that this is just a test site, but from the perspective of the abutters and recreational users of the Nanaquacket Pond area, just a test site seems like it may as well be the full site. So I'm not sure that just a test site is a really accurate way of describing it in that nature. The other thing that's been commented on several times is the fact recreational boat site, recreational boat use, and in Nanaquacket Pond, although there's not a lot of motorboat activity in the southern end of the pond, there's a significant amount of kayak use, stand-up paddle boards, small sailboats, recreational fishing, and even recreational shell fishing. And have any of those site uses of that area of the pond been considered?
All of those uses will be considered in the process.
And last question for me, another one for Dave. Do you know when CRMC is going to officially, is this test site permit, let me start over. Does this test site application require a 30-day public notice like a commercial site would?
It does not. However, with the number of objections that we've had, will have to go to the full council for a public hearing.
And do you know when that council meeting would be?
Looking at the council schedule now, it would probably be October.
Would that be for the testing or for the full scale, Dave?
For the testing.
Okay.
And last one, Bruce and the rest of the Harbor Committee, we have started talking with a bunch of neighbors about this since we learned about it just recently. And although we do understand that the Harbor Commission does not directly have a say in this, we would really look forward to discussing with you and look for your vote to not approve this towards the town council as you did in 2010, I believe.
I think you misspeak as to the 2010 application, but nonetheless, the council is hearing the people, and we have 18 letters I have to read in unless someone speaks in and says, don't bother reading my email. And Dave Butel has already made it clear that given the amount of resistance or objections that have been raised, he believes this test siting at both locations, if I'm correct, Dave, would probably go to the full council.
Correct.
Okay. So move on to the next person, please. Mr. Chris.
So, Chris Matkovic,
Right.
he's coming in. You gotta unmute yourself. Try it again. There you go.
All right. Hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes.
Thanks. Most of my questions have been asked actually, text and from Seth, but, just wanted to raise I guess, an issue of what I see of, and was mentioned donating that land to the land trust, such an intimate and kind of natural body of water for this site where the growth have to take place on the surface of the water is to me a little bit troubling. It seems like there's larger bodies of water with more room where this can take place. So to me that's a main objection. And again, getting back to the fact that, although these different grow methods were discussed, the sediment on the bottom there is not going to allow a bottom grow. The low tide won't allow the lantern grow, I don't think, and I'm not a professional, but it's going to resort to this top water grow, which is the most obstructive type of grow from a sort of aesthetic point of view and an access point of view, because you can't just go around those things. It's a full field of bags. Thank you.
Right, shall we go on to the, thank you, Chris. Go on to the next person.
So W Cars.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
My name is Wayne Karzensky. I was the one who asked the question about the snorkeling in the area. I just wanted to make sure you had my name on record. I live at 355 Winnisima Drive.
Okay. Is that all you have to say, Wayne?
Yeah, it was just the issue that I've been snorkeling in that very area for 30 years, for little necks, and it does close down that spot for quail hoggers. In the wintertime, we do get people coming down, the quail hogging boats, the professionals. For us in the neighborhood, a bunch of us do go out there and pick up little necks once in a while. So, but overall, I do like the idea of aquaculture. I know it's intrusive. It seems as if it might be a little bit better further to the south, away from the mooring fields. I also have a mooring out there, and getting it out of the area of high traffic might be advantageous. But
okay, next person.
And I lost my split screen.
Okay.
Come on.
Now we have 6 participants with raised hands on my screen.
Yeah, I probably lost my view thing. Yeah.
Hmm.
Hang on, I'll get it back.
Hey, while he's doing that, I'd like to ask another question if I can. Is we've had questions about the mooring fields and the boating. What's the impact at nighttime? Is this area going to be somehow marked at all for boats that might be moving around at nighttime? Or are they typically marked, these kind of fields?
It's a requirement that they're marked. And ones in the river are required to have lighted buoys on the offshore end.
Okay, we're bringing in Jeff Karen.
Jeff, and you have to unmute.
Hello. Hello, am I there?
Yeah.
Hi, thank you, Chris. So if I heard right, I've got a couple points to make. Jeff Karen. First of all, I just want to say I do live on the east side of Nanaquacket Road, but I live down by the bridge. So I just did take a look out the back, and I in no way can see where this would be from my property. So I don't necessarily have a stake in this from the standpoint of looking out my window and seeing this activity or these things in the water. But I do share some concern with regards to, first of all, what I heard, which was the gentleman from CRMC, I believe it is, said that once there's an aquaculture farm, i.e. in this case, an oyster farm, that there could be no cohogging in that same area, in that same water, in that same spot. And as we all know, so many people cohog in the Nanaquacket Pond even today, and many of the kids use the pond to learn how to bull rake, especially down at the shallow end there with the short poles. And in addition, even in the winters with the north winds and whatnot, or in the early winters, it's a place that's somewhat protected. So it bothers me that in having cohogged, as some of you may know, 8 years myself when I was younger, it bothers me that something that was available would all of a sudden be for the exclusive use of a protected farm. Second point I'd like to make is that from the standpoint of recreational use, I did a couple of years ago, I did do a little bit of water skiing. And I have to say that when you get down to that part of the pond, obviously it's high water when you have to do it, but down by that little white house down there, it's some of the flattest water you'll find. And it's fabulous. Even though we have the sea breeze going in, especially like after work, it's fabulous down there at that end of the pond. And so I just want to make a note for recreational purposes that where that rectangle was, and I know we're only talking about a fraction of the rectangle now, but as the gentleman said from CRMC, he was not able to say that these things tend to get denied. They might take a little different form. And so if this were approved, there's a good chance that we would see something there down the road. And with that, we would probably lose, it would be probably a lot more difficult to take advantage of that recreational aspect in that smooth water that so many people have coveted for decades. And the third point I want to make, I'm trying to move fast. The third point I would just want to make is that specifically, it struck me when I saw the maps that were put up, I believe by Mr. Sundberg, the aerial map on the pond side of where it was located. It struck me that the red zone, again, which would be potentially the fully expanded area, but it was essentially right off of the what was about a 4-acre parcel that sold, what was it, 5 or 6 years ago, and there's since been 2 gorgeous homes built on it. And of course, those 2 homes, as beautiful as they are, we all know pay dearly in tax revenue, I'm sure. And so it just doesn't seem right to me that the view that they have, they pay dearly for waterfront, they have that property, and it's not my view, but it's their view, but I know how I would feel if it happened to me. And they're looking out at that, and all of a sudden they now have, let's just look out, potentially in 3 years, a full-size operation there with or some sort of access through the land across the way. I think that's the old Marvel land there across the way, and going on up with what, trailers, trucks, who knows what's going to be over there with holding the equipment to look at. And so I just think that, if something like that can happen, and just, it's almost like having a commercial, you're not allowed to have commercial stuff in a residential neighborhood. It's just the only difference here is it's the water, but it just so happens that the water, it happens to be one of the most coveted and expensive things to to own on. So I think we have to be cognizant of that and understand the impact it has to those 3, 4, 5, 6 homes that pay so dearly for that piece of pristine view right there. So my question would be specifically to Mr., and he seems to have disappeared now, Mr. Cullen, who I think was there, who I believe might represent the person in charge wants this farm, or maybe with the farm people. But I can only imagine that those 2, 3, 4, 5 homes, you know, they pay dearly in property taxes, and everyone knows my position on property taxes. But I'd like to know what kind of taxes Mr. Cullen through this farm would be paying to the town. Like if he had the operation, like would he be paying taxes on like the piece of water that he gets, the acre? Would he be paying any taxes on the land? Like he doesn't sound like he's going to own the land on the beach. I'm just trying to understand, because I know there's an awful lot of property value, you know, a hit on property value that would happen for those people who do live right there. And I want to know what he's going to be paying in taxes to this town, and what he is going to be doing to compensate those people for their hit in property value to their assessments. Thank you. Does Mr. Cullen have a comment on that?
I do. Hi. So I am a property owner as well in Tiverton at 1780 Main Road, which is a small commercial space. I do not know the answer to what the tax implications are for having the rights to farm and have the rights to a body water. I do not know the tax implications, but I'm assuming that I would figure that out, and the state would tell me, and the town of Tiverton would let me know that as well.
Okay, well, I'd be interested. I'm going to start checking in on these meetings, and you know, I'd be interested to find out like what you will be paying, or your business would be paying, not you personally, but your business would be paying in taxes to the town. I'd be interested to hear that.
I understand, and you know, I'm a taxpayer, so I pay my taxes. So whatever is mandated, that is what we'd be doing. We'd also be employing locals and providing jobs as well, in you know, in the town of Tiverton as well. So our goal is to be part of the community.
Okay, those are my comments. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Bruce.
Yep. Now I see 4 hands up.
So Ben Michaud?
You hear me?
Yep.
Hi, so my name is Carolyn Michaud, and I guess my son must have been using my laptop. That's Ben. But we have a home at 19 Delano Island Street, and so we are on the other side of the inlet. So there are 2 small inlets, and I think the proposed site is on one of the inlets. Just from a personal standpoint, we've had our summer little cottage there for about 5 years, and we love to recreational boat. And believe it or not, we're able to do a lot of recreational boating, even though it's very shallow, because we have an outboard motor on like a small, you know, oh, I can't think of the name of it. It's a 19-footer, really old boat, but we love it. And so we do a lot of boating around the whole pond, including our inlets whenever the tide allows us, which is pretty often. But also for kayaking and things like that, we kayak. That's the biggest area where we use our kayaks. We have 2 kayaks. But I do think that there are an awful lot of residents in the similar position to me, that are residents on the pond that have all these uses. And I do know families directly that are on the side where the site is proposed that would definitely be impact between all the different activities. They have grandchildren that do kayaking and swimming and boating. And so, yeah, I definitely wanted to raise that concern. I wanted to ask Mr. Garfield, Seth, I know you sound very knowledgeable about this, and I know you're doing this in Cuttyhunk. What is like the summer population of like recreational people on Cuttyhunk? Do you have any idea, like, of a ballpark figure? Like, who's there staying in the summer using the area recreationally?
There's about 500 people that live on the island and about 1,500 daily visitors in the summer.
So,
And on any given day, there could be 10 or 15 or 20 people out. The pond that I use is not accessible by motorboats. So they would be out kayaking or walking, birding, etc.
So,
I give eco tours as well.
So do a lot of people, I mean, the times that I visited Cutty-Hunk in the summer, when the ferry came in, there was a beachfront right there. And, you know, we visited a friend's home, but we were also on that beachfront that was near where the ferry is, not too far. I mean, is that where a lot of people, because I'm generally thinking like, that's a different number entirely, I think, than what we'd be dealing with on Nanaquacket. I mean, I know there's only 20 residents year round, somewhere in that ballpark, right? In the wintertime and in the off season. But I do know a lot of people come by ferry, but I think a lot of people are not necessarily using that pond the way ours is. Ours is, because we have so many homes on all sides of it, we have so many residents, year-round residents and cottage users. So I think that's the problem. The problem is that there's one person requesting this use for the farm versus the residents, the many, many residents that are already there. So we sort of feel like we need to have more of a voice, but I does sound like the panel is hearing us a little bit. But I did want to sort of differentiate. I think Cutty-Hunk, where yours is located, might be distinguishable.
No, you're absolutely right. The land that surrounds our pond is owned by one family. They've been very supportive, and but the pond is owned by the town, so citizens can go out and quahog and oyster and recreate there. Obviously, the pond here that we're discussing is very, very different. But farming. I look at the town of Westport, and that's a right to farm community. Yeah. And farming is also aquaculture, and it's a conflict that's been going on for decades, unfortunately. But the use of public waters for private aquaculture. But there are also a lot of people in Rhode Island. You look at Perry Rasso and what he's done down at Matunic Oyster, and Bob Reel started the Moonstone Oyster Company, and the benefits that have come from that, both recreational, commercially, ecotourism, cleaning up water, producing wonderful shellfish that's out there. And if you go into the Providence Airport, Perry Rasso has a whole wall with his oysters on it, and I'm sure there were certain concerns there, but down the road, there's a lot of positive things that come out of it.
I do. I really recognize. I mean, I think you've pointed out a lot of the pluses on it. I just wanted to point out the other side where there are a lot of us being impacted, and not necessarily in a positive way, even though these do have positives. But we would be impacted in a less positive way. And I also think that there might be other locations, particularly in the Portsmouth area, where there are already existing aquaculture farms that may need to be explored, as opposed to this one where so many recreationalists would be impacted. So I just wanted to put that thought out there. So.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any other raised hands? I'm not seeing any.
So I don't see any, but I should make a comment here for you that anybody who's on a phone, if you want to speak, all I have is your phone number here. You need to hit *9 to raise your hand. Okay, and then we did have one. No phones came up, but we do have a Rob Wood. So I'm going to move him up to be able to speak. Rob? Good. Rob? Rob?
Okay, can you hear me?
It's not Rob. Okay, Rob, who is this?
This is Lori Wood.
Okay, because it comes up
Rob
as
Wood is my husband. We live at 50 Delano Island Street. I've been on Delano Island for 50 years. My parents live at 45 Delano Island. They're still there.
Okay.
My question is for Keith Cullen. If he buys that property at the end of the pond, it's my understanding that you can't clear that. So how would he possibly use that to access his oyster farm? Because it's within the boundaries and CRMC does not let you clear any of the property on the pond.
Keith?
Yes, hi, sorry. Hello?
Yep, we hear you.
Yep. I'm sorry, could you repeat the question? I lost signal with my phone.
I believe the question was if you were to purchase the land in the pond, the thought is that property cannot be cleared for some reason. How would you access the oyster farm?
Well, that's something that Seth and I would work on. I mean, part of the land itself was not necessarily to clear it 100% and gain direct access, but really to preserve as much of the wetlands as possible to create a buffer, and then work with Seth and Coastal Resources and DM to see if there's a possibility for a dock. Otherwise, we'd have to seek other means and methods.
Well, it's a known fact that you cannot clear the land on Nanaquacket Pond. There's people who have their houses there. They don't have direct access to the pond because they're not allowed to clear it. So that's just my point I wanted to make. But also, how will you access this test site also? Because it's my understanding that Donnie Helga didn't even grant any permission to access through his property. Apparently he doesn't even know who you are. So I'd like that answered also.
Hang on a second. I'm going to unmute him. Right, you can unmute. Come on. How come we can't? Oop. Trying trouble unmuting you. Oop. Damn it. Can you unmute yourself? There you go.
Yeah, I'm trying to undo that. So that piece of property is owned by Paul Marvel, and he and I Phil Marvel. He and I have been speaking, and we actually have an agreement. We're not looking to clear the land by any stretch of the imagination. It's 23 acres. Our goal is to preserve as much of the property as possible and only have access as we need to gain access to that portion of the pond, which is directly in front of the oyster farm location.
Did you contact CRMC and ask if that was even a viable
we
means
have
to
not,
get to the pond?
CRMC, we have not. So one is contingent upon the other. We're not going to go through that process until we have an understanding of the viability of the current site. And worst case scenario, assuming the site goes forward, we'll then contact CRMC for access to the pond that way, along with a land donation. And then if that is not possible, we will find another commercial application to farm the location.
Okay, could you answer the second part of the question about how you will access the test site? Because as I mentioned before, I spoke with Donnie Helga from Don's Marine, and he said he never granted permission, and he also said he doesn't know you.
Well, I've not specifically spoken to Don himself with regards to the site and utilizing any opportunities off of his commercial pier.
But it was stated on your application.
Well, I have spoken to Don in the past. He is my neighbor from the property that I currently own. That was one of the possibilities that we were looking into as a possible land.
Uh-oh, he's having difficulty.
He's freezing up, Keith.
Mrs. Wood, if I'd also answer that, we do a lot of business with Don's Marine from Cuttyhunk. And in passing, I spoke with him, I think 6 months ago about this to say, if we had to do testing, could we launch a boat there? Because we launch our boats there when he launches them. And it was a very casual conversation. And there's lots of other opportunities to either come under the bridge, to come down there and launch at a public boat ramp to do the testing. So that was just throwing it out there in a very casual way, only because we do business with him professionally.
Now, quickly, Laura, you had sent an email. This is Bruce Cox. You had sent an email to me relative to your opposition to this. Do you need me to read that into the record, or do you feel your questions have been answered?
I feel my questions have been answered. I just wanted part of the record.
Okay. We'll
Thank you.
A copy of your email will be part of the written record. I will not bother reading it.
They didn't talk to Don at all. That's why Garfield was.
Can we next go on to the next participant, Chris, please?
So I don't have any other participants as it relates. Let me just double check and scroll through the listing. But I don't see anybody else with their hands up.
Okay, excellent. So why don't we close this and go to the commission members, and starting with Dave Stewart, because you're in the center of the screen to my right. Could we have your thoughts on these two sites generally, and then we'll take them individually, please?
Oh, I certainly think that we need to do a lot more research with it. And my choice would be probably the Nanaquacket site if it were adequately vetted and approved. But if they were going to go to the one on the Sakonnet River, it would certainly have to be moved to an area closer to the existing one near Jack's Island.
Thank you. Andy, please.
Yeah, I'm opposed to the Sakonnet River one for exactly this reason that David mentioned. I think that being in the middle of the mooring field is problematic, and there's other places where it could be located. In terms of Nanaquacket, I don't know the business, but it seems to me like it's a pretty odd place to try and shoehorn an oyster farm. There is obvious impact to the homeowners there, but it's also just, it's very shallow. There's a lot of fresh water coming in, and it seems like a tough spot. I would be inclined to not approve it just because of the impact on the area. I'm in favor of aquaculture. I'd like it to be somewhere. I think both of those sites are problematic.
Thank you. Jason?
Yeah, I think I would echo Andy's sentiments. I think looking for a more favorable site for the Sakonnet River site, where it will be less impactful to boaters, but also keep the operation sort of out of harm's way as well. I think might be definitely advantageous to all parties. And as far as the in the pond site, I do echo Andy's concerns that there might be a little too much recreational activity there to that would be displaced by the siting of a farm there. It just seems like it would be extremely shallow, and no matter what sort of technology was put there in terms of gear, it would be very exclusive to recreational activities in the area. So yeah, I might be opposed to that one, although like Andy said, I'm very much in favor of aquaculture for a number of reasons in other areas.
Okay, now on to Chip Lawrence.
Yes, I think the one off of Winnisimmett is quite problematic for the boaters. And so getting it out from where the fields are is, I think, very important. And so I definitely oppose that. I have less difficulty with the one in the pond.
Greg Banner.
Hi, yeah, mirroring all the other comments and concerns. I would just add what I tried to get to with some of my questions to CRMC and others was a broader view of this type of operation. Again, trying to be supportive of aquaculture and commercial operations. And I would like to understand it in terms of all possibilities. Looking across, if it's going to be in Tiverton, what else is available, and basically what is the best sites given all concerns of residents and every other concern. And I have no feel at all for that. And to me, that's limiting. Thank you.
And Paul Duarte.
Yeah, I feel it pretty much the same way. I don't really think the location on the Secana River side is good in the mooring field. I think it creates a problem for those boaters in that area. I do believe that a better location could be found. I don't know why somebody would want to put. I mean, just moving around in my little dinghy in and out of the pond, the cove around those mooring fields is sometimes a pain, because especially at low tide, and you're only moving around with a little 4-horse engine or the dinghy. So for those reasons, I would say the Secana side is definitely not a good location. I think it should be another location should be searched for. The other thing is the Nanaquacket pond. I feel the same way after hearing all the people that are really against it, but nonetheless, it's aquaculture and it could be a good thing. But I'm really not sure. I'd really like to see I know that whole pond is a fishing area, is a shell fishing area. So that would restrict that area, and I'd really like to hear DEM's to chime in and say what they think about that. And then the other thing too is what just came up that I wasn't aware of was this access at the end of the pond by that land down there. So again, there's that. I really don't know enough about it, and I'd have to hear more. I have more questions, especially for DEM. So for that reason, right now, I would be against it.
So we have two participants with hands raised. I would like to have no more than those two people recognized so that we can move on. Chris Cotter, can you identify who those two raised hands are at this point so we can terminate? I don't know how to do it otherwise with Zoom.
One is Paul, but the other is L. Sylvia. I'm bringing the person over. L. Sylvia?
Oh, she's muted.
Yeah, I'm trying to unmute her.
Yeah.
Sometimes they try to unmute themselves and we conflict.
I did that the other night.
There we go. Oop. Where is she? Can you hear us? Sylvia? Hello? Hello, Sylvia. You're live. So if you're on a phone or look on your keyboard to see if you're muted on your keyboard for your microphone. You're not muted from us. So either your volume is way down or your microphone is off. We can't resolve this.
All right, very good.
We tried.
We're going to terminate at that point. There is one question from Chris Matovich to all participants about this. She says, it sounds like several panel members live on or use this kind of mooring field. Is this a conflict of interest with voting yes, no, for the two proposals? Sounds like there's more opposition to the Secana site from the panelists because of personal use. I can tell you that I live slightly to the north of that. I look down upon that mooring field. I can see it from my house. I do not use it. I think I'm the only person that is in that area. Other people are speaking from experience. All of us on the board, on the commission, are actively involved in the water, on the water, and are in many instances intimately familiar with different areas, even though we have no direct personal contact to it. Where this proposal more to the north of North Lane, for instance, then I might very well have to recuse myself, because I do live there. I have the third to last dock on the Sakonnet River. Excuse me, but I do not have a conflict of interest as it relates to that particular site, because it does not impact me at all. I do not go down in there other than when I'm going putting along in a dinghy kind of deal. So that would not be a conflict of interest. That being said, I have 17 emails I have to read into the record. But before I do that speed read, I will tell you my feelings on this. I think the panel has hit it right on the head that the proximity of the Sakonnet River site is bad for the mooring fields and would be bad for the oyster farmers. There's more space over by Jack's Island, recognizing that both these applications are going to have to go to full coastal anyways, because of the amount of objection. And that's according to come on, Bruce, Dave Butel of CRMC. In terms of the access to the Nanaquacket site by way of that land, that all that land, I believe, is residential zoned. It's not a commercial site. You cannot run a commercial enterprise off of residential site without either a zone change or extreme relief from the zoning board, which I quite candidly would think that'd be nearly impossible to get for that particular site. I do that professionally, and I'm familiar with the standards of relief that are required. I would be concerned about the oxygen levels you're going to see down there. And the floating cages arguably could be an eyesore to people that are living there in that area. That was a part of the problem before. The application in 2010 were bottom cages in that area with simple floats. So that's my feeling on that's the general feeling. We will have a vote after I've read these into the record. And forgive me, I'm going to go very quickly, but there are a lot of them. So the first is Thomas Flaherty, and he says, I'm concerned about the Zoom format for the June 1st meeting regarding Nanaquacket Pond Oyster Farm, and I am sending this email to record my opposition to the oyster farm in the event I'm unable to communicate during the meeting. Next is from Deb Hagan. Her comment, I respectfully request the comments below be read aloud at the June 1st meeting and entered into the public record. I'm concerned I may not have an opportunity to publicly address my opposition at the virtual meeting. Please reply to this email acknowledging receipt, which I did. And I gave anyone who emailed me, I also gave them the contact to Coastal. As an abutter to and a user of the Nanaquacket Pond, I submit my opposition to the viability of aquaculture 2020-03047. My family moved to Nanaquacket Road in 2012, and since that time has frequently and consistently kayaked, canoed, used SUP, I guess, I don't know what that is, sailed and fished at the southern end of Nanaquacket Pond. The application states that the location of the site is in shallow water that historically has not been used for recreational activities except for high tide. This is simply not true. I am able to observe from our house and our dock frequent recreational use in the southern end of the pond at both high and low tides. In roughly the 10 years since the commission unanimously opposed the last commercial lease applicant in Nanaquacket Pond, 2 houses were built on the southern end of the Nanaquacket Road and the next 9 consecutive properties have changed hands. Families and young children activity couples have moved to the neighborhood and used the pond for recreation. Furthermore, since motorboats and water skiers typically turn around right in front of our dock, we send our 10-year-old twins into the shallow end of the pond to explore with their kayaks and nets in an area typically free from powerboat traffic. Friends have allowed their children to kayak and paddleboard in this part of the pond, supervised from our property, feeling the shallow end of the pond provides a safe place for them to learn these activities. The application states the area will be accessible for kayaks if needed, as if they can paddle around the marked area. What may be true for a 1,000-square-foot test site is not true for the operation in full scale. If the allowed 9.6 acre farm would not only restrict access to public waters, it would make public waters undesirable for recreation. Cages and gears would be exposed at low tide, creating a potential safety hazard and unsightly viewscapes. The application states the visual impact will be negligible. A 1.96 acre oyster farm would dominate the southern view of my property and negatively impact viewscapes from dozens of abutting properties. The application states that historically there's been some commercial shell fishing in the area of the pond. In 2010, the Rhode Island Shell Fishermen's Association and the Rhode Island Marine Fisheries Council opposed a commercial lease on Nanaquaka Pond, stating the pond was historically fished. I would also like to address the negative impact an oyster farm would have on our property value. I've been advised that CRMC does not take property value into consideration when reviewing aquaculture applications. I say this is wrong and respectfully request that you consider it. Our water views add value to our property. Our water access adds value to our property. We are facing unprecedented unemployment rates and job insecurity, as well as looming recession. It is not right for the presence of one commercial entity to jeopardize the property values of dozens of homeowners on Nanaquaka Road, Main Road, and Delano Island. To conclude, I remind you that in 2010, the Harbor Commission, the Town Council, and the Rhode Island Marine Fisheries Council, and Rhode Island Shellfishers Association, the State Senator of District 12, all opposed a commercial aquaculture application in Nanaquaka Pond. The Nanaquaka Neighborhood Association is in the process of revitalizing opposition to this application. We are finding support from Tiverton residents, are currently collecting signatures from the community. I respectfully ask you to oppose the application 2020-03047 is a site on Nanaquaka Pond. And Deb Hagan lives at 540 Nanaquaka Pond. And I believe hers is the longest email. Next is Michael Sarnowski, who lives at 77 North Court in Tiverton. As a resident in North Court, I would like to enter my opposition to the public record regarding the coastal application 2020-03048 for an oyster farm located on the Sconnet River south of North Court. Next, we go to Eleanor Eggett. I would like to officially register my opposition to the oyster farm in Nanaquaka Pond. I have a cottage on the pond at 2523 Main Road, and farming will inhibit boating and swimming as residents have always enjoyed and disturb the tranquility of the area. Eleanor Eggert. Next is Claire Schoenfeld. I am concerned about Zoom meeting format for the June 1st meeting regarding Nanaquaka Pond Oyster Farm. I am sending this email to record my opposition to the oyster farm in the event I am unable to communicate during the meeting. Yours, Claire Schoenfeld, 404 Nanaquaka Road, Tiverton. That's her repeating. We don't need that. E. Covert. Hi, Nancy. I'd like to register our opposition to the application of the Nanaquaka Oyster Pond, application 2020-03047. Is this sufficient notice? Liz and Tom Covert, 430 Nanaquaka Road. Next is Mike Scheffler. And Bruce, I'd like to this record entered in public record at the upcoming meeting. I live on North Court in Tiverton, and my family uses the proposed spot for recreation, including kayak fishing. I have 3 sons that are almost out there daily to fish, along with my oldest son having a youth quahog license. We all paid a premium to live in this area to enjoy the recreation and its beauty. I'm all for local business, but feel it's much better place in the area than would be better suited for the farm. Thank you in advance for your consideration. And he just said he lives on North Court. Lori Wessel. The purpose of this email is to document my husband, Rick Wessel, and my opposition to the Nanaquaka Pond application 2020-03047. Test to determine the viability of Nanaquaka Pond as a commercial oyster farm. Please enter this letter in opposition to in the public record on June 1st meeting, where the topic will be discussed. We are concerned that the virtual meeting format could make it difficult to communicate our concerns during the meeting. My and I live on Nanaquacket Road at the south end of Nanaquacket Pond. We moved there in 2018 from Ohio. One of the primary reasons for buying our house was that it had access to the pond and recreational activities supported. We often use the south end of the pond for kayaking, canoeing, paddle boarding, and rafting. This year, we filed for a mooring permit so that we could add boating, a small dinghy, and perhaps fishing to the list of activities we can do there. We are not the only ones who use the south end of the pond. The shallowness of this end of the pond and the fact that it's protected from open waters make it particularly well suited for children. The last time we were out kayaking, we saw 4 children paddleboarding, 2 kayaking, all in the south end of the pond. The need for physical distancing due to the pandemic has reminded us all the importance of Rhode Island natural resources and the benefits of being able to get outside and exercise our physical and mental well-being. Thank you for your consideration. So she lives on the south end of Nanaquacket Road. I don't have this particular address. Dave and Caroline Ahern, who are at 210 Nanaquacket Road. Please note we strongly oppose the above application 2020-03047 for an oyster farm on Nanaquacket Pond. This pond is with a pond with a long history of recreational use that allows a range of activities, including kayaking, boating, and fishing. Oyster cages will significantly interfere and disrupt these activities. Furthermore, there is a safety risk with obstacles in a pond of this size. Please keep us informed in advance of your upcoming meetings. Next is from Vincent Majowski. I'm writing this email to voice my opposition to the pond proposed oyster farm test. I want my opposition read to the public record, application 2020-03047. My property abuts Nanaquacket Pond, and this pond is used for many forms of recreation. Then Rebecca Majowski. Okay, I am ready to express my opposition to Nanaquacket Pond 2020-03047. Installation of an oyster farm in Nanaquacket Pond creates a conflict of use as the pond is frequently used for many recreational activities as an abutting property. To the pond, I oppose this application for trial studies and installation of a oyster farm. Sincerely, Rebecca Majowski. Next is Ryan Parks. He lives at 482 Nanaquacket Road. As a new resident of Tiverton, specifically Nanaquacket Pond, I write about application Nanaquacket Pond 2020-03047. I am concerned about such an important matter is being handled via a virtual town hall meeting, and that residents may be disenfranchised by not having their presence or voice heard. In the event I'm not able to attend, I am writing my opposition for the record to this application. We moved to Nanaquacket Pond specifically to raise our children on the water. The location provided protection from traffic and a calm, gentle atmosphere for them to learn to swim, boat, fish, and enjoy the beauty of nature. The proposed oyster farm would take away from all those things, in particular in that area that provides the most shelter and safety from pond traffic. And he, again, at 482 Nanaquacket Road. Lori Wood, she spoke and she waived the reading of hers, but it will be entered in on the record. Then we have Brian LeCompte. Mr. Comte, I'm a lifelong Tiverton resident, and I'm emailing you to my opposition to Nanaquacket Pond Oyster Farm application 2020-03047. My family makes use of the pond along with countless other kayak, paddleboard, and canoe enthusiasts. The area where the proposed farm is going is pristine and used extensively for recreation. It would be a shame to ruin such a beautiful area and decrease the use of the pond to the public. He does not give an address. Next is Richard Westlake. Okay, my name is Richard Westlake. I reside at 309 Nanaquacket Road and have owned my home for 35 years. I own 2 moorings at the foot of North Court where I have riparian rights. The waterfront was a major draw when I purchased my property. I've enjoyed swimming, boating, and views for all these years. I have just become aware of the application of shell fishing in our area. I fully support the use of a marine environment for shell fishing farming. I recognize the economic and environmental benefits of doing so. I do, however, take issue with citing the farms along densely developed shorelines, such as the shoreline referenced in the BP application to establish a farm in the proposed Secundit River location. I'm very familiar with the shellfish farm at Dutch Harbor and offer a comparison for your consideration. 1, the Dutch Harbor farm has no shoreline development. The proposed Secundit site is adjacent to a significant residential development. 2, the Dutch Harbor farm has grown to several acres and affects navigation in the area. This Secundit site could not grow without significant impact and enjoyment of North Court and Winnissimmet Farms mooring fields. 3, a view of the Dutch Harbor farm makes it clear that there are so-called viewscape issues where there are no shoreside views affected. The Secundit site would clearly have shoreside viewscape implications. Having sailed the Secundit River for decades, I see many sections of the shoreline where there are similar depths, similar tidal flow, and similar bottom conditions to the proposed site, and little or no shoreline residential development. These areas have much less recreational use, no moorings, and no waterfront development. I encourage the CRMC to deny the application as drafted and encourage the applicant to find a more suitable site. Thank you for the opportunity to comment. So he lives on North Court. Excuse me. Salim Margerby. She lives at 106 North Court in Tiverton. This letter is in reference to the application filed on March 17th, 2020 by BP Realty LLC by Mr. Cullen to the Coastal Resource Management Council in regards to proposed aquaculture operation in Nanaquaca Pond and also on the Concord River. As a resident of the area, I would like to formally state I am in full opposition to this venture and would like this to be extended into the public record. My family moved to this area specifically to enjoy the beautiful natural resources of the pond and river offer. I truly believe that commercial aquaculture operation is suggested would have irreversible consequences for marine ecosystem in our area. I find it disturbing that Mr. Cullen has tried to move forward with this without hopes of raising too many eyebrows. As he stated, in this true international pandemic we have all succumbed to in the last few months, please feel free to contact me. And she lives at 106 North Court. Next is Lori Wessel. Lori Wessel. My name is Lori Wessel. My husband and I live on Nanaquaca Road at the south end of Nanaquaca Pond. I understand the consideration is being given to locating an oyster farm on the north end of the pond. We are opposed to this. The south end of the pond, I misread. We are opposed to this as we often use that area in the pond for kayaking, canoeing, paddle boarding, and swimming. We moved here a couple of years ago from Ohio. One primary reason for buying a house in the harbor was to access the pond and recreational activity it offered. I'm getting the feeling I read this before. I have read this before. Seth Garfield. Yes, Seth Garfield. Thank you for your time 8 weeks ago before the virus hit to discuss the Cullen application. As you know, we connected with Dave B at CRMC, who then connected me with you as the chair of the commission. As you know, I've been working with Mr. Cullen to apply for the location. This is Mr. Garfield's email to me, and a spot on the river for test grow oysters. I'm checking with you to see if we need to be on the agenda, and this is just him getting onto the agenda. So, and then 3 people actually filed their comments with the town formally. It's with Brian Lecomte, Tom Flaherty, and Claire Schoenfeld, and they did exactly what they took their email and submitted that to the town as well. So I'm not sure, given the format of CRMC and the format of the CRMC and the Zoom meeting, if those are, if it has to be filed with the town to make them legitimate or not. But at any rate, they have been. So those are those, and I'm very glad I got through them. So at this point, I would like to do a roll call vote of the commission. I would like someone to make a motion first relative to the Nanaquacket Pond application, please.
So this is Andy. I move that we vote on the Nanaquacket application as written.
And what is your motion, Andy?
That we take a vote.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm asking for, is a motion to one way or the other, up, down, sideways.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
Yep.
I second.
I move that we vote against the application.
And that's it.
I second that motion.
All right, we do have Dave Stewart and Paul Duarte seconding that, so we have plenty of seconds. On a roll call vote, please, I will take, and this is just the sequence that you are in our minutes. So where's that? There we go. First, Dave Stewart.
I believe I vote that we deny it.
Greg Banner,
So vote to deny.
Andy Sunberg,
Vote to deny.
Paul Duart,
A vote to deny?
Jason Claremont,
A vote to deny.
Peter Core. He's not involved. He's not on. So, okay. Charles Lawrence,
Vote to deny.
and I, the chair, will also vote to deny on the Nanaquacket site. So we're denied. Denied a recommendation of approval. We will be submitting a letter to CRMC to that effect, and a comment to the coast to the town council. Next was the Secana River site, west of Winnisum, south of North Lane. May I have a motion, please, from somebody on the board?
Yeah, Greg, I'll make a motion that we vote against the application.
I'm sorry, you broke off. What you broke?
I'll make a motion that we vote against the application. And I'll
Okay.
vote way myself.
And do we have a second?
I'll second that.
So Charles Lawrence is seconding the motion to deny the Secana River site. All right, then again, by roll call vote, we're going to start again with Dave Stewart, please.
I would vote for more of research on
Okay, the motion is to deny it. So you are.
it. Okay, so I do not deny it.
So you're voting nay. You're not voting to deny it.
Correct. Sorry.
Okay. Greg made the motion. So Greg, your vote is, please.
My vote is in favor of my motion.
Okay, so you're voting to deny.
Yes.
Can we amend that? Can we amend that that motion?
Well, the move on would have to agree to that. What is your proposed amendment?
I would propose that we deny that location and we have them search for a more suitable location away from the mooring field and possibly down in the area of Jack's Island.
Greg, did you hear that? That was Paul Duart making that as a suggestion. Would you allow that amendment to yours?
Well, I guess a point of order that they can always come back and modify or request something new in any form, right? So I'm not sure what the amendment, what purpose it would serve, actually.
Yeah, maybe you're right there.
I mean, I believe this is they gave an application and we should vote on it as it stands. Yeah.
All right. So you're withdrawing that proposed, Paul?
All right. Yeah, I'll throw that out.
So now we've had Dave Stewart, we have Greg Banners voting to approve his motion, which is to deny the application. Dave Stewart was voting against the denial. Andy Sunberg, please.
I'm voting in favor of the motion, which is to deny.
Okay. Paul Duart,
I vote to deny.
Jason Claremont.
I'm in favor of the motion as written.
Okay. Charles Lawrence.
Vote to deny.
Okay. I'm going to vote in opposition to the motion because I believe that it could be relocated out further out. And while that would be a new, different application, I think we're advisory. So I think CRMC might take that under advisory as opposed to having to go through the whole exercise again in that instance. So we have that, and I've got to make some notes here.
Hey, Bruce.
Yes.
I think that might have been worth clarifying at the outset of the voting. I'm not sure how the other members feel, but I think if that was given an option, to deny the motion with provisions, I have a feeling other members might have opted for that. They
very well might have. Would members like to reconsider the vote, or would we recognizing we're advisory, we're not the ultimate be all end all on this. And we can send that comment off to coastal.
I think I'm happy standing with my vote.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not in opposition to somewhere near Jack's Island, just not right there in the middle of the mooring field. But I think just denying it as it is, as Greg suggested, they've heard our conversation.
Right.
They've heard we said there's better places, so just move it.
That's correct. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So, Mr. Garfield and Mr. Cullen, thank you very much. We're on to our next item, which is the Bowen Aquaculture Farm, and hopefully they're now somewhere in the field. Do you see them anywhere, Chris Cotter?
Let me look. No, so the Bowen brothers are here. Can you raise your hand? Because you might have a phone number that I don't, can't recognize you. I do not see the Bowen brothers raising their hand or in written form with their name published.
Okay.
*9, right?
*9 gives you hand, raise your hand. So if you're one of the Bowen brothers, please raise your hand if you're on the phone. If you're one of the Bowen brothers and you're on a telephone, please raise your hand by pushing *9. One more time. If you're one of the Bowen brothers and you're on a phone and we need you to speak, you need to raise your hand, press *9. I think we got 3 strikes here.
Very good. So we'll take up the Bowen application. That was actually now a formal application to install their site. That application was shared with all the board members, commission members, when it was received. We have some questions that exist about the site. Would anyone want to take the lead on that?
Yeah, I'll take the lead on that. I see 2 problems with putting it where they have proposed. Somewhere else in the vicinity might work, but where they're proposed, there are 2 problems. That is directly where the water flows out of Sepauwett Marsh. We know by our own testing and DEM's testing that bacterial counts are high, even just on the other side of the bridge. They may be all right at some times where they've proposed, but I'm not sure they would be consistently. Equally, if not more important, that zone is right where it comes out of Sepauwett Marsh. That means that that is a major ecosystem right there, right? Starting with the nutrients feeding the algae to the zooplankton, to the bait fish, to the fish, to the crabs, and to shellfish that inhabit that area. And that has an impact on, well, I don't fish there personally. I fish from a boat. There are fishermen who fish there, so we like they're the top of that food chain. And not only that, because it is at the food chain, it has impact all the way down the Secundit River, right? For what goes on from there, the bait fish that go out that feed fish further on down, the zooplankton that goes out, and the fish that come up there to feed and then go back in the river and affect fishermen. So for those 2 reasons, I strongly oppose position it right in that outflow. If they move it further out, like if you look down off of Little Compton, then I would not object. If it were similar to where it is off of Little Compton and Almy Creek comes out.
Okay. Anybody else have any comments? Jason, might you?
Yeah, I might. I had some comments on the actual some of the language in the application itself. I know when there was some discussion previously, there was some discussion about access to that site and how they would actually work that site, and there was some discussion about accessing via waders from the public landing area right there. And Apparently that was revised when the site was moved just a touch further offshore, and now they're supposedly going to access it via boat, but the language in the application persists that they will be accessing the site using waders or shorts during the summer months. And I find that somewhat troubling that the language is persisting in the application, because if they were to still access via the beach and out in waders and taking up public parking for the commercial purpose of working the farm, that they might have some jurisdiction to do so because it is still in the application. The second point is just that the application actually states that the site would still be possible for people to walk through or wade through or kayak through. And, you know, not being someone who runs an aquaculture operation now, I kind of find that hard to believe that anyone that has a commercial lease running an oyster farm would want somebody traipsing through their aquaculture lease. Kayaking through I could understand, but you know, just the intimating that people would be able to just kind of come and go as they please through this site and it wouldn't impede any access, I think is a bit misleading. There's a little bit of a lack of detail in the application about exactly how many cages will be there and the spacing between the cage trawls. You can do some extrapolation and come up with those numbers, but I would really maybe recommend to CRMC that there's some clarifications of some parts of the application before it's potentially approved.
Anybody else have comments?
I believe it's close to shore, and I think it just inhibits the public access to the area. I'd be fine to have it relocated, but not where it is now.
Also, there's a mooring that'll be directly in the middle of that farm, and it'll be encroaching into the Sepauwett mooring field.
Okay. And this is the Bowen application, okay. So it'll be encroaching in the mooring field that's already existing in Sepauwett?
Yes, and one mooring will actually be right in the middle of their field.
Well, to get to it.
I believe they have it marked off. Is that correct, Tyler? I was out there the other day and there's some yellow buoys that looked like it was marking off.
Yeah, that's marking off their proposed farm area.
Was a mooring in the middle of it?
Yeah, it's down right now for the winter, but he brings it up. It's guy by Metcalf. He's been there forever. The second house after the bridge.
Okay, so that would require relocating of that mooring, and someone obviously has to pay for that, and whether or not that's a valid reason to allow it. Okay, Andy, do you have any comments?
No, nothing to add.
Okay. Paul, do you have any comments?
Well, my problem that I had in the past was, you know, its location being on the public fishing area. When the DEM was at that meeting, they showed that their mooring field, that their farm was completely or 90% in the public fishing area. So if it's outside the public fishing area, now they can't access by waders. They have to access by boat. So you know, and the fact that there's actually a mooring in the farm is another problem. So that I didn't know about. I didn't get any information on the new location. I didn't see it. You may have sent it out, but I may have not have seen it, because I would have definitely pulled that up and went through it. So I guess there's some problems still with that application, and Those things would have to be cleared up. The fact that they've put it in somebody's mooring area now, and its location being accessed by boat, and the fact that it was Andy that you said that it was still in the application to be accessed by land, by waders. I don't understand how that's going to happen. Waders are only good for about 4 feet, right? And then you need something else. Yeah, you need to go under. So, I think it's just too much up in the air right now for that Bowen field.
If I may, so they moved it from where you would stand to fish to where people actually cast their lures or their flies.
That is correct. They've moved it outboard somewhat, but not a lot.
Yeah,
And-
right on where the channel is, where the fish are and where the fishermen fish.
Yeah. I think they're a little south of the channel, but not by much, and
Yeah.
certainly not.
Yeah, a little south of
behind you. Okay. Greg Banner, did you have any comments?
I think in general, I'm struggling with a way to get to yes. I mean, I'm wondering where, anywhere we would be easy. And I don't think it's easy anywhere. I think we're so congested. We've got people everywhere. We've got fishermen everywhere. I think we've all sort of made comments about being in favor of aquaculture. It's hard to balance the two things. I think of everything we've seen tonight, though, what I know of this site, the one that concerns me the most, the issue is the health impacts, being in the runoff area out of that river. But I'm thinking that's other people's business. I would hate to defer it, but I think it really is. If it ends up not being a healthy spot for this kind of an operation, then I think that's going to fall out on its own. But I would tend to otherwise. And I think we have not heard from any of the neighbors who are there, which I would take more into consideration. I don't think we have any input from any of the people adjacent, like we did tonight with the other locations. We got plenty of input, but this location, I think we still have zero input from any neighbors. So none of them seem terribly concerned with it, I would say. So that's my only input at this point. Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
I actually missed the fact that they had moved the location. I was concerned that if they were going to try and service it with waders, it was going to be a genuine safety issue, and the town ultimately would end up having to dispatch resources to save these guys. I like the idea of getting the wading verbiage out of the application. That'd be something I'd really support.
Right. This is a formal full application now. Dave Butel can answer that question. Is Dave still on, Chris?
I don't see him.
Okay, and you got your hand raised. You're trying to call your attention to yourself?
Yes, well, I'm not a member of your board, and I am here to help facilitate this meeting. I will say that I have had a meeting with CRMC about this particular issue, and that one of the council members, Donna Cook, and the town solicitor and myself had a conference call with CRMC about setting up a MOU so that we would be able to articulate from the town's concern. And I explained to CRMC, I know that they have the right to lease the bottom of the water. It's their prerogative. And I know that you have the right to provide advice and consent as it relates to that. But on a regulatory matter, because of where this farm is located, it's in a very rural district. And the original application had language in it that implied that they would be using waders and that they would be taking the product out across Sepauwett Beach, which is a very fragile area. And the number one concern from an administrative standpoint is we have zoning rules, and that whole area is not at all commercial enterprise. It's all residential property. And it would behoove us to ensure that any of these types of applications that come along, that if they're gonna grant a license for them to do things in the water, and you have far more say about what happens in the water than I would ever guess, but to run a commercial enterprise off of a beach or off of somebody's personal property is a direct violation of the zoning rules. So I didn't want to see commercial trucks sitting down there on Sepauwett Beach, having product taken out of the water, and trucked over the beachhead, simply for somebody to make a profit on. Even though that beach, Sepauwett, belongs to DEM, it still doesn't belong to the town. It's still inappropriate in a residential area to allow a commercial access or commercial operation for somebody to make a profit on. It's just not zoned for that. So we suggested to CRMC as part of a MOU that any of these types of entities that they allow to do, these oyster farms or aquaculture, that they should be able to access them by, implement them from a boat, do whatever they need to do by boat, and take their product to a commercial dock or to a commercial ramp. That it should not be ever allowed to come across any residential property, because it's just a direct violation of our zone. It's not fair to the residents in that area. It's a small rural country road down that way. I know it gets a lot of, traffic from residential people or from people viewing the water, but it really isn't a commercial viability place for people to do business like that. And we articulated that to CRMC, and they took that under consideration. I would hope that in your comments, you could also address that same concern.
Very good policy.
Well, very good. I tend to agree with exactly what Charles set out was in terms of the flow. When we first had this before us, I was one of the people that did not vote to deny, because I felt they would come back with a better application, more off the beach than they are. They're still in the fishing zone, and they're still very much in the direct flow of the outlet there. And for that reason, I think that the application, now that it's a formal application, is still defective, as members said before. That there were some very vehement feelings about that. I know Paul was very upset that these guys are going to park their cages right where people could walk out and go caw hogging, and it's a public caw hogging spot and whatnot. And I'm not sure how DEM is going to weigh in on this, because their representative hasn't spoken or contacted us relative to either the two other applications or any further on this. That's my gist on it, and I was also could not imagine how they're going to handle their outside cages if they're at low tide and 4 feet of water, and that doesn't take into consideration any kind of wave fetch, for crying out loud, if you got waves going. So I would like to see a motion on this one way or the other, please.
Are you going to allow anybody from the attendees?
Do we have public out here? I
We don't
apologize.
have public out here, but let me see. Does anybody in the attendee list, Ben Michaud, Mr. Goach, Matt Matkovic, Jeff Karen, or Shirley and Mo Shuanad? Do you have anything? If you want to speak, raise your hand. Does anybody in the attendee list want to raise your hand to speak? Okay, I'm going to ask a third time. Anybody who's remaining in the attendee list, if you would like to speak on the Bowen matter for the aquaculture, please raise your hand. There's nobody that wants to speak, so you can close the public portion and go to your votes.
Thank you. So we'll close the public portion now. From one of the members, please, can I get a motion on this?
Yes, I vote that we recommend denial of this application.
I second that.
So the motion is to recommend denial of the application to CRMC, but moved by Charles Lawrence, seconded by Dave Stewart. So on a roll call vote, we're going to start with Dave Stewart. You vote aye?
I vote that we deny it.
That would be denied. Greg Banner.
I vote, yeah, I'm going to stick with voting against the motion at this point.
So you're voting nay. Okay. Andy Sundberg.
I vote to deny.
Okay, so you're voting aye. Paul Duarte.
I vote to deny.
So you're voting aye on the motion. Jason Claremont.
I vote aye as well.
Okay, you're voting to deny. Peter Core is not present. Charles Lawrence.
Yes, I don't deny, that is, I support the motion.
Okay, and I am also supporting the motion. So it is not unanimous, but it is close to it. Okay, got the vote. All right.
You know, the fact that they're willing to service it by boat is good. And now they can locate it somewhere that's not a problem.
That's correct.
So,
all right, so that was item G 1 and 2. We're done with that, those two hot budget items, and we're now at 9:35. Going back to the top of the agenda, if we could, let's see if we can cruise a little bit here. Greg sent me the minutes for the March meeting. Did anyone else? Greg, did you send them out to everybody or just to me?
I saw.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, I thought you had sent them out. I haven't sent anything lately.
Do people have the March minutes, or should we put this off to the July meeting?
Vote
I have
for
them.
the March meeting.
I saw them earlier today. I don't know when I got them.
Yeah, I got them.
Any comments on the March minutes? Or do we have a motion?
I make a motion to accept the March minutes.
I second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
aye.
Okay. Public comment section. Well, I don't think we have public comment any more than we've already had tonight, unless there's somebody that's an attendee that's out there. We have still 18 participants according to my screen.
Well, 10 of them are you panelists as board members, and obviously Andrew Rice and myself, and we still have Seth Garfield as a panelist. I could move him back over, but
Yeah, he could come off. I mean, he's technically doesn't even have standing to speak at this point.
yeah, I didn't want to throw him out of the meeting.
No.
I'm trying to figure out how to move him back over to an attendee list. So hang on just a minute, I can do that, I think.
If you can hear me, I want to thank the board for their fairness tonight.
Thank you, Seth. It was
Thank you.
It's tough. I mean, you can talk to us elsewise as well. There's a lot of knowledge on this board.
Yes, we appreciate your thorough knowledge.
Okay, I'm going to move these to an attendee. All right, so you have as attendees, I think some of these people are still not here. I'm waiting for that screen up here. On attendees, we have Paul Duarte, who's actually on the phone, so he's on your meeting.
Yeah, he's a member of the board.
Yep, but he shows up in the attendee because they have him video. That's why he's up there. So Ben Michaud, Benjamin Gotesh, Goetschch, Christopher Matovic, Jeff Karen, L. Sylvia, Mo and Shirley Schoenard, and Seth Garfield, who I just moved over. And if any of the attendees want to have public comment, is that what you're asking for? Please raise your hand. And nobody has, so.
Okay.
And the only thing I would just go back to correct, just so that you, and I know that it's the way we're supposed to, but your last vote was unanimous. As a roll call vote, just it's Jason Claremont. Yes.
No, the last vote was not unanimous. Greg did not support the motion to deny. Greg voted nay.
Okay, I just want to make sure we get a roll call vote to do it. That's.
Yep, we did.
And our last vote was on accepting the minutes.
That's right.
Yeah.
And that was unanimous, but you just need to name the people so that we know who voted.
Oh, I apologize.
That's okay. I knew there was something I was trying to clarify.
All right. So even on that, yeah, thank you. in terms of correspondence, the only correspondence I really had to report is all that which I read. Next time I'm going to delegate. Old business, Sepauwett and Fogland boat ramps.
Yeah, I called the solicitor
Yeah.
and talked to it was Mike Marcello,
Right.
solicitor. I actually called him today, had a discussion. He said he was going to try to make it to the meeting. He said his best way to go after it, in his opinion, would be to bite a piece off at a time. There's a lot to do, and he said it's really not part of his what he's hired for. It's not really his job, but he would help us. But what he did was he said we should write a letter to the town to investigate all public access points to the water, so maybe we need to start there so he could get involved.
Okay.
I really don't know what else to do. I mean, and I did do a little bit of research also for Sepauwett for Jack's Island access.
Right.
That road does not seem to be. I can't get an answer from the state, so does not seem to be a state public access road. So I think it would be a town public access, and the town says it's not their responsibility to resurface that dirt road or to re-gravel that dirt road. So I think we'd have to bring that up as a separate issue. The access is there. Looks like somebody's trying to block it with some big boulders because it's a little bit choked off. And to reestablish it would be something that we should look further into. But maybe we need to start with the town, to write a letter to the town council and say, as part of the public access points, who is responsible to resurface that dirt road. And as far as the Fogland boat ramp goes, they won't get back to me. I keep calling this the town, the state garage there in Portsmouth, and leave a message. I've left countless messages, but nobody gets back to me. So I don't know where to go now with that. Maybe it's something the town solicitor could do in order to get the state to refurbish that boat ramp. It would be nice to be refurbished.
Actually, that came up in a conversation that I was involved in with Chris Cotta and was it Tyler? Yeah, when Tyler was on the phone regarding the blocking of the beach down there on Fogland that's going on.
Yeah.
And I think Chris was going to try. Chris, do you remember that
Oh,
conversation?
I can give you a little bit of update. As it relates to the ramp, at Fogland, at the end of Fogland Road. I didn't get a chance to talk to the Public Works Director today about trying to get down there at low tide to try to scoop out some materials. But I also think that we're probably going to need a CRMC access permit, which is probably just an administrative issue to resolve that.
Yeah.
But on the far side, was it the north side of Fogland, where, past the beach, around to the right, we have blocked that off, and I'm getting a lot of flack from it right now because I guess there are some people who have moorings in there. But the issue is that people are driving up and parking on that beachhead again, which is another fragile area. And we originally blocked it off because we had believe it or not, during this COVID issue, trying to deal with all the people coming in from out of state, using our beachhead areas for recreational purposes was driving our police department crazy. So we restricted a number of areas like the parking at Fogland, and we tried to block off that north end just so the police didn't have to go there between March, April, and May. And now we're into June, and I understand it's an issue. So I don't fully understand what the access rights are down there and whether or not people should actually be driving on that. So, I'll have to work with your group and others to determine what is an appropriate use down there and what we'd allow people to do without making a mess or, disrupting a fragile area. So, I'm all ears as it relates to that, but the original intent was to mitigate some of the issues of having the police just going all over the place. As you know, that most of you may know that during that period of COVID issues, with the governor's order restricting out-of-state people coming in for recreating, we had signage on every public area that we had.
Yeah,
So
right, yeah.
all those signs are coming down because that restriction has now been lifted by the governor.
Oh, okay.
So all of our beaches, all of our areas, all of our parks are available to any state where they have lifted their stay-at-home orders. And all of New England has pretty much lifted them. So all those signs have to come down. And I'm assuming we will have to now open up that north end of Fogland, but I would really like some guidance as to what's really allowed to be used there without disrupting or hurting that fragile area.
Yeah,
So-
I don't know. I'm not familiar. That's the public water access at the north end of
I
Fogland.
don't know if it's a public water access. I know people have moorings in that area and they put their dinghies in through there, but to there,
Yeah,
we're
but-
going in and out of there with trailers, and we've got campers parking in there.
Yeah.
So
No, there's a public water access down there at the north end too, but that's not a boat ramp.
No,
was
and
more-
we did block that off because we had a dispute with the neighbors about people going in there and dropping trash. I mean,
Yeah.
we just went in there and took out a couple of toilets, some sinks. It's,
Hmm.
and they take pictures of videos of people, crapping in their yard. It's so,
Oh yeah.
I know.
Yeah, I get the same thing here because I live next to the Bank of Newport. There's no public toilets open, and they come behind the Bank of Newport, and they crap and leave it right there in the drive-through. It's unbelievable. Yeah, I know.
So we've been trying to mitigate those issues, but I've probably overstepped my bounds when I did that, and I'm probably going to have to relent and take those boulders out of there. But I would like to get the Fogland ramp cleaned up, and there's a bunch of commercial fishermen's material there that needs to get out of there that's on our property. So, and I think Tyler is aware of it, and I think we're going to try to reach out to the person who has it.
The commercial fishing equipment, that was a guy down in Little Compton. Some of you people knew who he was. You know who it is?
Yeah, I know who he is. I'll be contacting him this week. I got to talk to him about his mooring anyways.
Okay, well, tell him he could lose his out-of-town mooring rights if he keeps crapping up our bogland area. All right. Next item on the agenda is investigate coordination with U.S. Geological Survey. I would suggest we move that to the July meeting because I don't think anyone's been reaching out to them. I think, yeah. And I know Greg's been just a little bit busy. He's only been working 7 days a week, 12 to 15 hours a day, trying to keep us all alive. And thank you, Greg.
Well, I'll make that motion if you need it.
Okay.
Move it out.
Move to July. We just do that. We don't need a motion.
Okay.
The dinghy landing at Stonebridge abutment. I spoke to Fred Souza this weekend, actually, about not only that, but also the tree removal, the debris. And he's had to lay off all but one of his guys during the COVID. So he is a little scant, but he was excited about the idea of still being able to get those floats in and willing to volunteer, his equipment and such, and to get it on trailers to get the floats in the water. So that's something we can probably still visit. Although Chris, what's the status on the budget and such that was approved? Are they making modifications on an emergency basis to the budget at all?
So that's a pretty technical question. Because the town had submitted their budget and have finished it and gave it to the budget committee, the only entity that can really change it is the budget committee.
Mm-hmm.
Because we don't know where we're standing with revenue, that budget is in abeyance right now until the state passes something. So they won't act on that until after the state does its budget, and they'll be 65 days after that. So in the meantime,
Yeah, you don't have a budget on July 1st to start.
well, we do technically. We have a budget that will follow from the current year. By law, we can use the existing budget, but the biggest problem with that is that budget doesn't give us the ability to tax. So I still don't have any money coming in. So we got a real dilemma coming. The state legislature is looking at giving us some relief by passing a legislative enactment that would allow us to take the current year levy and put a quarter of the year tax bill out based on the current year levy, which would give us cash flow. But we need the legislature to do that. So while there is a potential to have a budget, that budget isn't what the paper it's written on if I don't have any money behind it. So
Very true. And $10,000 of the proposed budget was to do the dock system. So
yeah, well, that's so if it's not in the current year budget when July 1st comes and we don't have a budget, we'll be limited to what the current budget is until such time that there's an FTR, and then there'll be an adjustment one way or another. And I don't know where we're going to go with the adjusted budget because we have a huge revenue shortfall, both this year and next. So without the gaming money coming in, and we fully expect that there'll be another phase of this pandemic that will probably shut the casino down yet again, which will take away the guarantee yet again. So the town is in pretty tough shape, banking on all that gaming money to be used in the budget. So that's the dilemma we're in. We're waiting to see, obviously the state has to give us some better numbers as it relates to the general numbers we get from them. With them being $1 billion in a hole over 2 years, we're not sure where that's coming from. And there's another iteration of the feds coming out with another care package. But that's stalled in the Senate right now, and we probably won't see the light of day of that until either late July or maybe August before we hear anything on that one. So we've got some big problems we're going to have to resolve. So that means I would assume that all the budgets are going to get cut, and then we'll probably try to get some sort of resolution passed that would grant us the ability to spend additional monies if we do get federal relief.
Okay.
But and that'll be prioritized somehow. And I haven't worked with the budget committee to figure out how to do that yet. But we got a tough road ahead of us yet.
So that may be dead in the water by virtue of lack of money, unless we do some kind of campaign to raise the money ourselves. Would there be a prohibition for us to do that as private citizens?
I don't think so, because I know that they're doing a fundraiser for the recreation who just received, there was that grant for town farm. Part of that grant is they have a match to that, and they're raising part of that match by a campaign. I will have to find out exactly how to do that so that if you do one, and I would think it takes council permission to do that as well, that the monies would be set aside in some restricted fund somewhere for that campaign.
Okay. Thank you. And the last item is the flood mitigation grant pole elevation straps. I was really excited about this because I hope I can get back to the guy. I hope he's still around with National Grid. He's going to coordinate with the people from Verizon that own half the poles each. And he was very enthused about it and saw that it would not be a problem. So I'm going to do a little report on that, and we'll address that in July. But that's got legs now. It's an idea that seems to come to fruition Chris, what this is the utilization of telephone poles as a support structure to put some kind of strap or water elevation at the low points on given roads, so that if there's a flood, you can look at the telephone pole, you'll see a strap that says there's a 1 foot of water in the road, or there's 2 feet, or there's 3 feet.
Oh,
So you have that as a marker. That was actually an idea of Roger Winiarski of our group, who's I could actually reach out to and see if he's ever going to come back. But so that actually has legs. I had a great conversation. I was looking at the notes from my file and said,
okay.
forgot all about that. This
That makes sense.
2 months of fun and games we've been having.
Okay.
Okay, anything else? Harbor Master, mooring status. You got a bunch of checks in the mail, I think.
Yeah, that was mostly new applications. All the mooring renewals are in. Actually been getting a bunch of new applications, and most of them are riparian owners, so those are going right out. The boat's up and running fine, no issues with that.
Great. So with that, Charles Lawrence, do we have a favorite motion?
Yes. I have a motion. I move we adjourn.
Second.
I second that.
All right. We'll call a vote. David Stewart.
I second it. I vote we
Sundberg.
adjourn.
All right.
Hey, just one question. I know we're adjourned, but Chyla, you still there? Nope, we're all done.
I'm still here.
What's that barge in the basin?
It's a barge in the basin
Yeah.
on a mooring.
Well, it's on a mooring.
Yep.
Okay. What do we need a barge? Who needs a barge in the basin on a mooring?
The owner of the barge wanted to put it on a mooring for a week.
Oh, just there for a short time? I
Yep.
thought we were going to be stuck with that forever now. All right. Just curious.
Hey, 3-hour meeting. Time to quit.
So Greg,
Dinner and a beer.
Greg, I'll take the names that I had on the attendee list that I could actually print out, and the phone numbers, which I don't know who they are, and I'll email it to you.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Good
thank
job,
you.
Chris.
All right.
Good job.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank
All right.